You know, there are certain sounds a man is never supposed to make. Sounds that violate some unspoken social contract, some fundamental law of neighborly conduct. Then there are the sounds a man has to make. Sounds born of righteous indignation, civic duty, and about 30,000 watts of pure, unadulterated audio firepower. This is the story of the second kind. It's the story of how my obsessive, borderline unhealthy hobby collided with the immovable object of suburban tyranny, and how for 2 glorious, deafening minutes I became the tornado siren my neighborhood desperately needed. It all started, as most suburban tragedies do, with a laminated piece of paper. My garage is my sanctuary. It's my laboratory, my temple. To my ex-wife, it was Exhibit A in the divorce proceedings. But what does she know? The air inside smells of ozone, solder, and the faint, sweet scent of overheating capacitors. The walls aren't adorned with pictures of family or serene landscapes. They're lined with pegboards holding spools of 4-gauge wire, specialized crimpers, and tools that look like they belong in a mad scientist's operating theater. In the center of it all, gleaming under the fluorescent shop lights, was my magnum opus, the Brown Note. She's a heavily modified 1998 Chevy Astro van, painted a rather uninspiring shade of beige, a tactical choice to blend into the suburban landscape. But beneath that unassuming exterior beats the heart of a monster. A bank of deep-cycle marine batteries, wired in series, feeds a monolithic amplifier the size of a microwave oven. The entire rear of the van, from the back of the driver's seat to the tailgate, is a single, custom-built, folded-horn subwoofer. It's a labyrinth of birch plywood and acoustic dampening foam, meticulously designed to do one thing: move a colossal amount of air with terrifying efficiency. I was in the middle of a delicate procedure, fine-tuning the system to hit a perfect 33 Hz sine wave. It's a notoriously tricky frequency. Too high, and it just sounds like bass. Too low, and it's sub-audible. But get it just right, and you can feel it in your soul. You can feel it in the fillings of your teeth. It's the kind of frequency that makes you question your choices in life, and I loved it. I had the van's side door open, a laptop perched on a stool displaying a mesmerizing green waveform on an oscilloscope program. Time for a test. I put on my industrial-grade ear protectors, took a deep breath like a bomb disposal expert cutting the red wire, and clicked the mouse. Vroomp! The sound was less of a sound and more of a physical event. The metal garage door shuddered in its frame. A jar of screws vibrated off a shelf and clattered to the concrete floor. The air in my chest cavity felt like it was being compressed by a gentle giant. It was beautiful, a perfect, clean wave. I grinned, admiring my handiwork. That's when I saw her. Marching across my perfectly average lawn, with the stiff-backed gait of a T-800 Terminator clad in Lululemon, was Brenda Miller, HOA President, Supreme Chancellor of Beige. Her platinum blonde hair was sculpted into a helmet that could likely deflect small arms fire, and her face was set in its default expression, a mixture of profound disappointment and the strained look of someone smelling spoiled milk. She was holding a clipboard. In the suburbs, a clipboard is never the harbinger of good news. It is the modern-day equivalent of a black spot. I sighed, killed the power to the amp, and slid off my ear protectors. The sudden silence was almost as jarring as the bass had been. I knew the protocol. She wouldn't knock. That would be too civil. Knocking implies a request for entry. Brenda didn't request. She decreed. She simply stood on my driveway, arms crossed, tapping a perfectly manicured nail against the laminated sheet on her clipboard until I acknowledged her divine presence. "Afternoon, Brenda," I said, leaning against the doorframe of my van. "Leo," she replied, her voice as crisp and cold as a starched collar. "We've received a complaint." We, the royal we. The complaint was from her. It was always from her. Her house was 3 doors down and across the street, but she possessed the supernatural ability to detect any frequency that fell outside the approved spectrum of lawnmowers, birdsong, and the distant, soothing hum of the highway. "A noise complaint?" I asked, feigning surprise. "That's odd. I didn't hear anything." Her smile was a thin, bloodless line. "Your sound experiments, as you call them, were rattling the windows of my china cabinet. They are, once again, in direct violation of Article 4, Section B of the Harmony Creek Covenant, prohibition of nuisance noises and other auditory disturbances." I swear she had the whole binder memorized. She probably recited it to herself at night to fall asleep. "Brenda, it's 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. Your lawn guy, Hector, was just here with a leaf blower that sounded like a jet engine taking off. I didn't see you handing him a laminated notice." "Hector's leaf blower is a tool for neighborhood beautification," she sniffed. "Your thing," she pointed a condemning finger at the brown note, "is a menace. It serves no purpose." Oh, but it does, I thought. It serves the glorious purpose of hitting 33 hertz. She stepped forward and thrust the clipboard at me. It was another violation notice, my 3rd one. The lamination felt slick and vaguely evil under my fingertips. "One more, Leo," she warned, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "And the board will be forced to levy a significant financial penalty. We must maintain a certain standard here at Harmony Creek." I took the notice. There wasn't much else to do. Arguing with Brenda was like playing chess with a pigeon. It knocks the pieces over, poops on the board, and then struts around like it won. As she turned to march back to her beige castle, she paused. "And I certainly hope you won't be making a fuss about the other noise issue the board is currently handling with the county," she said over her shoulder. "Some battles aren't worth fighting." I just stood there, laminated notice in hand, watching her go. I had no earthly idea what she was talking about, but a cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. In Brenda's world, a noise issue could be anything from a wind chime to a child laughing too loudly. But the way she said it, so smug and self-satisfied, felt different. It felt ominous. A few days later, the ominous feeling began to take shape, a horrifying, bright yellow shape. I was taking my beagle, Otis, for his afternoon constitutional. We were walking past the neighborhood common area, a sad, circular patch of grass distinguished by a single, perpetually empty gazebo and a few lonely park benches. That's when I saw it. A big white Ford F-250 from the County Public Works Department parked on the curb. 2 guys in high-vis vests were wrestling with something long and metallic in the back. As they tilted it out, I saw the speaker cluster on top. My heart did a little leap. It was a tornado siren, a brand spanking new one. "No way," I muttered to Otis, who just sniffed a particularly interesting dandelion. Our little corner of Harmony Creek Estates was in a notorious dead zone. The main town siren was over by the interstate, and if the wind was blowing the wrong way, you wouldn't hear it until the twister was already redecorating your living room. The county had been promising a new local siren for years. I ambled over, Otis trotting happily ahead of me. "Howdy," I said to the 2 men. "Don't tell me that's what I think it is." The older of the 2, a man with a magnificent gray mustache and a weary, sun-beaten face, wiped his brow. "If you think it's a T-128 rotational warning siren with a 128, decibel output at 100 feet, then you are correct, my friend." My inner audio geek lit up like a Christmas tree. A T128? That's a serious piece of hardware. What kind of amplification are you running on that? Class D? The guy, whose name tag read Gary, actually chuckled. You know your stuff. Yeah, it's a real beast. The county finally sprung for it after that close call last spring. This thing will cover your whole subdivision and half the farms east of here. We nerded out for a few minutes about acoustic throw patterns and battery backups. His younger partner, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, was busy marking the ground with spray paint, getting ready to dig. I was filled with a sense of relief. For once, something sensible was happening in this neighborhood. And then, like a shark fin cutting through calm water, Brenda appeared. She wasn't marching this time. She was gliding, propelled by a silent engine of pure indignation. She had her clipboard. Of course she had her clipboard. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "I don't seem to recall the Architectural Review Committee approving a new sculpture installation." Gary, the foreman, sighed the sigh of a man who had dealt with 1,000 Brendas. "Ma'am, we're from the county, Public Works. This is a tornado siren. It's for public safety." He held out a work order, a flimsy piece of paper compared to Brenda's laminated arsenal. Brenda glanced at it and dismissed it with a wave of her hand. "This is Harmony Creek private property," she declared, emphasizing the word private as if it were a sacred verse. "The HOA board, of which I am president, did not approve this industrial eyesore." Gary's mustache twitched. "Ma'am, with all due respect, we don't need HOA approval for a public warning system. It's mandated." Brenda took a step closer, her eyes narrowing. "It's sonic footprint," she said, and I swear she actually used those words, "will be detrimental to our property values. The vibrations could disturb the root systems of the crepe myrtles, and the constant high-frequency testing will undoubtedly chase away the native songbird population and give our residents' pets severe anxiety." The younger contractor snorted. Gary shot him a look. "Ma'am," Gary said, his patience wearing visibly thin, "we live in Oklahoma. This is Tornado Alley. This thing saves lives." Brenda was unmoved. She drew herself up to her full 5'4" height. And then she did something so breathtakingly audacious, so monumentally petty, that I could only stand there in slack-jawed awe. She walked over to the spot the kid had just painted, turned around, and stood in the center of it. She literally stood in the hole they were about to dig. "You will cease and desist immediately," she announced to the sky, the trees, and the two baffled contractors. "I am the president of this homeowners association, and I will not have this auditory monstrosity erected here. You will need to take this up with our legal counsel." Gary looked at his partner. He looked at me. I just shrugged, helpless. These guys were on the clock. They weren't paid enough to get into a protracted legal squabble with a suburban despot who had clearly gone off the deep end. "All right, lady," Gary said, shaking his head in disbelief. He gestured to his partner. "Pack it up, Tim. Let the county lawyers handle it." As they loaded the beautiful, yellow, life-saving siren back onto their truck, Gary caught my eye. He gave me a look that was a complex cocktail of pity, frustration, and shared suffering. A look that said, "You live here? With her? Good luck with that." I stood there, holding Otis's leash, and watched them drive away. The empty patch of grass seemed to mock me. She hadn't just complained this time. She hadn't just issued a fine. She had, through sheer force of will and unadulterated Karen energy, stopped a tornado siren from being installed. The conflict was no longer about my noisy van. It was about something much, much bigger. Brenda, never one to let a victory go uncelebrated, called an emergency HOA meeting 2 days later. The stated purpose, according to the hot pink flyer she stuck to everyone's door, was to discuss the recent unsanctioned county intrusion and reaffirm our community standards. It was being held in a small, stuffy, windowless room at the local library that smelled powerfully of old paper, dust, and institutional despair. I went, of course. I wasn't going to let this happen without a fight. And I brought backup. Dave, my best friend and a high school physics teacher, came along for moral support and to serve as my expert witness. Dave is a man who can explain the Doppler effect in a way that's both fascinating and slightly terrifying. If anyone could inject logic into this situation, it was him. The room was about half full. In one corner sat Brenda's cabinet, the HOA treasurer, a meek man named Gerald, who looked perpetually startled, and the secretary, a woman who nodded vigorously at everything Brenda said like a bobblehead doll. The rest were a smattering of other residents, a few young couples who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, a few retirees who came for the free, stale cookies. Brenda stood at a podium next to a projector screen, radiating smug authority. "Thank you all for coming to this vital meeting," she began. "As you know, our peaceful community was recently threatened by a severe case of government overreach." Then she started the PowerPoint. It was a masterpiece of propaganda, a work of art in the medium of suburban fear-mongering. The first slide was a lovely, sun-drenched photo of our neighborhood entrance. The next slide was the same photo, but with a tornado siren crudely photoshopped in. She had used the distort tool to make it look bent and menacing, like a post-apocalyptic watchtower. The slide was titled Visual Blight. Another slide had a picture of a cute, fluffy dog wearing earmuffs. The title, Acoustic Pollution, a Threat to Our Pets. My personal favorite was a slide with a complex-looking but ultimately meaningless chart she'd clearly made in Excel. It showed property values on one axis and proximity to siren on the other, with a dramatic red line plunging downwards. Dave leaned over to me. "That chart has no units," he whispered. "It literally means nothing." "Shh," I whispered back. "You're trying to apply science to a seance." Brenda clicked to her final dramatic slide. It just had a question in a large serif font. "What is the price of serenity?" "The county wants to install this device right in our beautiful common area," she said, her voice filled with pathos. "They claim it's for safety. But I ask you, what about the safety of our peace and quiet? The safety of our aesthetic harmony?" I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up. My heart was hammering. "Brenda." She turned, startled. She wasn't expecting dissent. "My name is Leo Maxwell. I live at 112 Oak Drive. With all due respect," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Are you out of your mind?" A gasp went through the room. Gerald the treasurer looked like he might faint. "This isn't about aesthetic harmony," I continued, finding my rhythm. "This is a life-saving device. We live in the literal heart of Tornado Alley. A visual blight is having your roof in the next county over. An auditory disturbance is the sound of a freight train coming through your kitchen. This siren gives us a warning. It gives us time to get our families, and our pets," I added, staring pointedly at the screen, "to safety." Dave stood up beside me. "If I may," he said calmly, "I teach physics at Northwood High. The sound from these sirens is highly directional. It's engineered for long-distance travel, not to shatter windows up close, and the weekly tests are a brief, controlled burst. The idea that it would permanently alter the sonic footprint of the neighborhood is, from a scientific standpoint, ludicrous." Brenda's face had gone rigid. Her eyes were like little slits of ice. "Thank you for your input, gentlemen. But I believe the residents of Harmony Creek are more concerned with their quality of life than with your science." She looked at her bobblehead secretary. "I move that the HOA formally petitions the county to cease and desist all attempts to install a warning siren on our private property, citing the board's authority as granted by our founding covenants. All in favor? Her two cronies' hands shot up. Then, to my horror, two other residents, a retired couple who were obsessed with their property value, hesitantly raised their hands as well. Brenda looked at the rest of the room. All opposed? Dave and I raised our hands. A young couple in the back did too, but that was it. The motion passes, 5-4, Brenda declared, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She banged a tiny gavel I hadn't even noticed on the podium. This meeting is adjourned. We were defeated, utterly routed. We left the library and stood on the steps in the cool evening air, stunned. Logic had not just lost, it had been laughed out of the room. You can't reason with a person whose entire worldview is built on a foundation of beige paint and perfectly edged lawns, Dave said, trying to console me. He was right. But as I drove home, I stared at the darkening sky. A storm was brewing in the distance, the clouds purple and bruised. And for the first time, I felt a genuine, primal fear from my neighborhood. We were silenced. We were unprotected. And it was all because one woman hated the color yellow. The week following the HOA meeting was a study in atmospheric dread. A huge, unstable spring storm system had decided to park itself right over the southern plains, like an unwelcome houseguest who drinks all your beer and clogs the toilet. The weather forecasters, usually all smiles and sunshine, started looking grim. They stopped talking about spring showers and started using words like volatile, significant event, and the one that always makes your blood run cold, dangerous tornado outbreak. My home turned into a makeshift command center. I had a live Doppler radar feed from the National Weather Service constantly running on my second monitor, a hypnotic swirl of green, yellow, and increasingly angry red. My phone was a mess of notifications from 3 different weather apps, each one trying to outscream the other with urgent updates. The Weather Channel, with its dramatic music and breathless meteorologists, became the soundtrack to my life. I became obsessed. I watched the sky. The clouds were different, lower, faster, with a bruised greenish tint that every Oklahoman learns to recognize and respect. The air felt heavy, electric, like the whole world was holding its breath. Meanwhile, Brenda was on a victory lap. She sent out a special edition of the HOA newsletter, printed on a cheerful shade of canary yellow paper, which I found deeply ironic. It was titled, "Harmony Creek Preserves Its Tranquility." It featured a large, smiling photo of her standing on the pristine, unviolated common ground, one hand resting proprietorially on the sad little gazebo. She was hailed as a hero by the small but vocal contingent of residents who believed that property values were more important than, say, not being swept up into the stratosphere. My frustration simmered, a low boil that threatened to spill over. I found my only solace in the group chat I had with Dave and Sparky. Sparky, real name Marcus, was the 3rd member of our little audio cult. He was a car audio installer by trade, a true artist who could weave wires into a tapestry of sonic power. His ride, a boxy Honda Element he called the Doom Cube, was a testament to his madness. It was less a car and more a speaker enclosure on wheels. The group chat became my pressure release valve. Me. You guys are not going to believe this. She sent out a victory newsletter with a picture. She's gloating. Meanwhile, the sky looks like the end of days. Dave. I'm watching the models. The convective available potential energy, CAPE, is over 4,000 JkG. Shear is off the charts. That's not just rocket fuel for supercells, Leo. That's the high-octane stuff. Sparky. Bro, chill. She's just a crazy lady. What's she gonna do? Fine the tornado for messing up her lawn? Me. That's the point. The tornado will mess up her lawn, and my lawn, and your lawn, and there will be no warning because she thinks the siren is ugly. Sparky. LOL, we should just be the siren. My Doom Cube hits 160 dB at 50 Hz. We could warn the whole damn state for real. I stared at that message. LOL. He was kidding. Of course he was kidding. It was the most ridiculous, reckless, and frankly illegal idea I'd ever heard. But a funny thing happened. The idea didn't leave. It set up camp in the back of my mind. A dangerous, beautiful, incredibly loud idea. I looked through the kitchen window into the garage, where the dull beige side of the brown note was visible. I thought about Dave's van, the resonator, with its precision-engineered long-throw speakers. I thought about Sparky's Doom Cube, a vehicle of pure, unadulterated bass fury. He's kidding, I told myself. He has to be. But what if he wasn't? What if a group of responsible, civic-minded audio enthusiasts decided to provide a temporary, high-decibel public safety announcement? A pop-up tornado siren, if you will. It wouldn't be malicious. It would be a community service. A very, very loud community service. Okay, it would almost certainly violate a dozen noise ordinances and probably a few federal laws I didn't even know existed. But was it morally worse than letting your neighbors get a surprise visit from an F4 vortex because their HOA president has a phobia of yellow poles? The question hung in the air. The ridiculous fantasy began to assemble itself into something that felt disturbingly like a plan. A contingency plan. A break glass in case of tornadoes plan. The day it all went down started with that sickly green sky and an air so still and humid it felt like you were breathing water. By late afternoon, the situation had deteriorated. The National Storm Prediction Center, which is basically the High Council of Weather Nerds, took the unusual step of issuing a PDS, particularly dangerous situation, tornado watch for our entire region. You have to understand, a regular tornado watch is a heads up. A PDS watch is a get your affairs in order kind of warning. They only issue them a few times a year when atmospheric conditions are so perfect for destruction that they expect multiple, strong, long-track tornadoes. My phone let out a horrifying shriek. The sound of the emergency alert system that cuts through everything. My blood ran cold. I flipped on the TV. The local meteorologist, a normally jovial guy named Skip, had taken his jacket off and rolled up his sleeves. He was pointing a shaky finger at a radar scan that looked like a giant, angry claw reaching for our county. "Folks, I'm not going to mince words," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "This is a life-threatening situation developing. We have a massive, discrete supercell thunderstorm right here." He circled a swirling mass of magenta and black, and it is showing very strong signs of rotation. There is a confirmed debris ball on the radar, which means a tornado is on the ground and causing damage. This storm is moving northeast at 40 miles per hour. It is on a direct path for Harmony Creek Estates. The name of my neighborhood on his lips was like a punch to the gut. My training kicked in. First things first. I called my mom, who lives 2 towns over. "Mom? You in the shelter?" "Yes, dear, I've got my knitting and the cat. Been in here for an hour." Good. I sent a rapid-fire text to my sister in California. "Big storm here. All good, just letting you know." Then I opened the group chat. My fingers felt like lead. "Me. This is it. PDS watch is in effect. Skip just called us out by name on live TV. Supercell is 20 miles southwest and tracking northeast. You guys seeing this?" The replies were almost instantaneous. "Dave, I'm tracking it. Velocity scan shows a classic tornadic vortex signature. This is the real deal, Leo. This is the one we always talk about." Sparky. "Holy crap. My lights are flickering. The sky is black. This is going to be epic. You thinking what I'm thinking? Please tell me you're thinking what I'm thinking. This was the moment, the point of no return. I could sit in my basement and hope for the best, trusting that people would see the news. Or I could embrace the madness. I thought of Brenda's smug, triumphant face in that newsletter. I thought of the young family who lived down the street with their 2 toddlers. I thought of the silent, empty patch of grass where a loud, beautiful, life-saving siren should be screaming its head off right now. My fingers flew across the screen. Me. Plan B, is it still a joke? A beat of silence. Then Dave replied. Dave, the ethical ramifications are complex. However, the legal doctrine of necessity argues that a criminal act is justified if it is committed to prevent a greater harm. The physics, on the other hand, are simple. Between our 3 rigs, we can generate a multi-frequency broadband audio signal well in excess of 140 decibels that could be directionally focused and broadcast over a 2-mile radius, effectively alerting every resident. Only Dave could make vigilantism sound like a physics problem. Then came Sparky. Sparky. Dude, yes. I've been waiting my whole life for this. This is our Super Bowl. Meet at your place. 10 minutes. The convoy rides. The decision was made. The die was cast. The Rubicon, as they say, had been crossed in a ridiculously overpowered van. It was a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad idea. And it was the best idea I'd ever had. The next 10 minutes were a masterclass in controlled chaos. It was like a scene out of a heist movie, if the goal of the heist was to be as conspicuously, earth-shatteringly loud as possible. The wind had picked up, howling around the corners of the house, a prelude to the main event. I threw open the garage door, the wind immediately trying to rip it from my hands. I jumped into the brown Note and fired her up. The engine rumbled to life, a comforting counterpoint to the storm. I rolled her out onto the driveway and began the pre-flight check. The bank of marine batteries was fully charged, glowing green. The monolithic amplifier hummed with latent power. I retracted the roof panel, and 4 massive electro-voice PA speakers rose from their housing like missile launchers, ready for deployment. I booted the control laptop and loaded the audio file. I'd created it a few days ago, in a fit of proactive pique. I called it the Brenda Buster 5000. It wasn't just a simple siren tone. Oh no, I had layered it. The foundation was a classic warbling siren wail, the kind that triggers a primal get underground response. But beneath that, I had layered a sweep of brutally unpleasant mid-range frequencies. From 2 KHOs to 5 KXDs, the auditory equivalent of nails on a chalkboard. It was engineered to be the most obnoxious, attention-grabbing, impossible-to-ignore sound I could possibly create. Just as I was checking the connections, Dave pulled up. His ride, the Resonator, was a decommissioned white Ford Econoline van that used to belong to a telephone company. It was less flashy than mine, but far more precise. Dave was the sniper of our crew. His van was packed with sound-shaping gear, EQs, and power conditioners. His speakers were military-grade long-range acoustic devices, LRADs, he'd bought at a government auction, capable of projecting a coherent beam of sound over a mile away. He got out, his face grim but determined. "All systems operational," he said, like an astronaut. A moment later, a gut-rattling bass note announced Sparky's arrival. The Doom Cube, his black Honda Element, rounded the corner. The vehicle itself seemed to vibrate in sympathy with the storm. The license plate was visibly rattling. He pulled up behind Dave, the bass so intense I could feel it in the soles of my shoes. He killed the engine and jumped out, a manic grin plastered on his face. "Tonight," he yelled over the wind, "they will hear our righteous fury." "Tone it down, Sparky," I shouted back. "This is a public service, not a heavy metal concert." We huddled behind the brown Note, the wind whipping at our jackets. "Okay, here's the plan," I yelled. Triangular formation for maximum coverage. Dave, you take the east entrance of the neighborhood. Your LRADs will cover the whole north side. Sparky, you go west. Let your base blanket the south side. I'll take the center, right at the common area. A little message for our dear president. Synchronize audio playback on my mark, Dave added, holding up his phone. We need to hit it at the same time to create constructive interference and avoid dead zones. Just as we were about to disperse, all three of our phones let out that terrifying shriek in unison. It was a new alert. Tornado warning. The watch had been upgraded to a warning. A trained spotter had confirmed a large tornado on the ground, 8 miles southwest of Harmony Creek Estates, moving northeast. Estimated time of arrival, 12 minutes. The air went out of my lungs. The game was over. This wasn't a stunt anymore. It was a rescue mission. The adrenaline that flooded my system was cold and sharp. "All right," I said, my voice low and serious. "No more games. This is for real. We go live in 2 minutes. That gives people 10 minutes to get to shelter. Synchronize watches. And for the love of God, put your ear protection in." We looked at each other. 3 grown men, 3 absurdly overpowered vans, standing on the brink of organized chaos. We put in our professional-grade 33 decibel reduction earplugs. Dave gave a crisp nod. Sparky pounded his fist into his palm. I took one last look at the swirling black sky. We gave each other a final, grim salute, jumped into our respective vehicles, and rolled out. The sound cannon convoy was officially deployed. Driving through Harmony Creek felt like driving through a movie set for the apocalypse. The wind was a physical presence, shoving my van around. Heavy raindrops began to spatter against the windshield, thick as paintballs. Trash cans, lawn chairs, and rogue recycling bins skated across the road like they were alive. The streetlights flickered and died, plunging the neighborhood into an eerie, churning darkness, punctuated by flashes of distant lightning. I reached my position, the common area. I parked the brown note right on the edge of the grass, my formidable array of PA speakers aimed squarely at the front of Brenda Miller's immaculate 2-story beige house. It was a petty move, I admit, but it felt so right. I looked at my phone, the screen a stark white light in the dark cabin. The countdown timer Dave had initiated was ticking down. 10 seconds. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo. This is completely insane. Yes, this is absolutely necessary. Absolutely. 3. I placed my finger over the big, glowing play button on my laptop's touchscreen. 2. I took a breath. 1. I hit it. There are no words in the English language to adequately describe the sound that erupted from our 3 vehicles simultaneously. It wasn't just noise. It was a tangible thing, a solid wall of pressure that slammed into the world. It was a 150 decibel hurricane of pure sound that vibrated the air, the ground, my bones, my very soul. It was the shriek of 1,000 demons, the roar of a jet engine, and the low, gut-wrenching throb of an earthquake all rolled into one unholy symphony. And above it all, that clear, unmistakable, warbling siren tone, the Brenda Buster 5000 in all its glory. Lights started flicking on in houses up and down the street. Silhouettes appeared in windows, panicked faces peering out into the storm. It was working. They were waking up. And then, as I knew it would, Brenda's front door flew open. She was a vision of suburban fury. She stood on her porch, silhouetted against her warm interior lights, wearing a silk nightgown and a matching robe. The wind tore at her, whipping her blonde helmet hair into a frenzy around her face. She was screaming, her mouth forming furious, silent O's against the tidal wave of sound I was producing. I saw her stab a finger at her phone, her face illuminated by its screen. Calling the cops. Right on schedule. But she didn't stop there. Fueled by a rage that defied all reason and sense of self-preservation, she marched off her porch, across her lawn, and directly towards my van. The wind nearly knocked her off her feet, but she braced herself and kept coming, a tiny, silk-clad soldier waging a war against physics. She got right up to my driver's side window, her face contorted in a mask of pure hate. She pounded a fist on the glass, though I couldn't hear the impact. I could read her lips perfectly. "I will end you!" I couldn't help it. I gave her a polite, gentle smile, and then I pointed one finger upwards, towards the sky. She followed my finger, and for the first time that night, the rage in her eyes was replaced by something else, a flicker of genuine, primal fear. She saw the sky. She saw the roiling blackness, the terrifying speed of the clouds. She finally understood that the monster wasn't my van. The real monster was coming for us all. Just as Brenda was having her moment of terrifying revelation, a new set of lights joined the chaos. A police cruiser, its red and blue lights flashing silently against the onslaught of my sound cannons, screeched to a halt right behind me. Its own siren was completely, comically, inaudible. Two officers burst out of the car. They were big guys, their faces grim, hands instinctively going to the sidearms on their hips. They looked utterly bewildered, caught between a hurricane of sound and a hurricane of weather. They stormed towards my van, yelling things that were swallowed by the noise. I couldn't just turn it off, not yet. The warning wasn't over. There were still minutes to go. So I initiated my backup plan. I had a spare tablet mounted on the dash. With a tap, I brought up a pre-typed message in a huge 200-point font. I held it up to the driver's side window. "Tornado warning, no siren. Providing community alert. Take cover." The older of the two cops, a sergeant with a graying mustache that reminded me of Gary the contractor, squinted at the screen. He read it, then read it again. His partner was still yelling. The sergeant grabbed his partner's arm. He pointed at my tablet. Then he pointed at Brenda, who was now cowering by her own mailbox. Then he pointed at the apocalyptic sky. I watched his face as the pieces clicked into place. The anger and confusion melted away, replaced by a dawning, horrified comprehension. He understood. This wasn't malice. This was desperation. He banged his fist on my window, getting my attention. He pointed emphatically towards Brenda's house, which had a covered porch. Then he pointed back at his cruiser. He made a frantic go, go, go motion with his hands. He wasn't trying to arrest me. He was telling me to take cover with them. At that exact moment, a transformer at the end of the street erupted in a blinding flash of blue-white light, showering the road with sparks. The entire neighborhood was plunged into absolute, pitch-black darkness, save for the strobing lightning. And then we heard it. Underneath the sound of my cannons, a new sound was emerging, a low, guttural roar that grew in intensity with terrifying speed. It was the tornado itself. The sound of 1,000,000 angry bees, the sound of a freight train, the sound the old-timers always talk about. It became visible then, a monstrous, black wedge cloud silhouetted against a flash of lightning, churning up the fields less than a mile away. It was immense, unholy. Brenda finally broke. The last vestiges of her defiance shattered. She let out a scream that I couldn't hear but could feel, and scrambled back inside her house. The two cops dove back into their cruiser. The tornado was its own siren now. My job was done. I slammed my hand down on the laptop, killing the sound system. The sudden silence was the most terrifying sound of all. All that was left was the wind and the approaching roar. I braced myself, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. The van began to rock violently as the outer bands hit. I saw my neighbor's roof shingles peel off and fly into the darkness. I saw a massive oak tree bend until it splintered, It was the most terrifying and awe-inspiring 2 minutes of my life. And then, as quickly as it came, the roar receded, moving off to the northeast. It was replaced by the sound of pouring rain and a strange, ringing silence. We had survived. Dawn broke on a world remade. The air was cool and clean. The rising sun illuminated a scene of controlled chaos. Harmony Creek was battered and bruised. Trees were down everywhere, their roots torn from the earth. Fences were flattened. A few houses on the north end of the development, closer to the tornado's direct path, had suffered severe roof damage. But as people began to emerge from their homes, from their basements and storm shelters, a miracle became clear. Everyone was shaken. Everyone was scared. But everyone was safe. No one was seriously hurt. They had all gotten the warning. My ridiculous, insane, glorious warning. I was leaning against the side of the brown note, the adrenaline finally leaving my system and being replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion when the two cops approached. Their cruiser was covered in leaves and mud. The older one, Sergeant Miller, no relation to Brenda, thank God, walked up to me. He had a tired, conflicted look in his eyes. "Son," he said, his voice gravelly, "I need you to understand something. What you did here tonight was the most phenomenally illegal, monumentally idiotic, and spectacularly reckless thing I have ever witnessed in my 20 years on the force." I braced myself. "I understand, Sergeant." He paused, looking around at the neighbors who were already helping each other clear debris, their faces pale but safe. "It also," he continued, letting out a long sigh, "probably saved a dozen lives, at least." He looked me dead in the eye. "Don't you ever, ever do it again." I nodded. "Message received." "We'll have to file a report," he said, almost apologetically. "There are going to be a mountain of noise complaints. Brenda's already called the station 3 times. The city attorney is going to want to talk to you. You're probably looking at a hefty fine." He said it all with a tone that suggested he would do everything in his power to make sure it was a slap on the wrist. He stuck out his hand. "But for what it's worth." "Thanks." I shook it. Brenda's comeuppance was a thing of pure poetic beauty. Her house was, for the most part, untouched. But a massive 100-year-old oak tree from the common area had been completely uprooted. And it had fallen with gentle, pinpoint accuracy directly onto her award-winning, prize-fighting, life-dampening bed of hydrangeas, crushing them, and her spirit, into a pulpy green and blue mush. Her reign of terror was over before the sun was fully up. Everyone knew she'd blocked the siren. Dozens of people had seen her try to confront me while I was actively warning them of their potential doom. The HOA recall petition was circulating by lunchtime. A few weeks later, I found myself in the surreal position of standing in a crowded town hall meeting. I was there for 2 reasons. First, to publicly accept a Community Heroism Award from the mayor, which felt deeply, deeply weird. Dave and Sparky were in the front row, cheering obnoxiously. Second, I was there to pay the $500 fine for violating the city noise ordinance, a check I wrote with a profound sense of satisfaction. The town council, red-faced and deeply embarrassed by the whole affair, had unanimously approved and fast-tracked the installation of not 1, but 3 new T-128 sirens in our part of the county. Gary, the public works foreman, was there. He shook my hand firmly, a huge grin splitting his mustache. "You're a legend, kid," he whispered. An absolute legend. The final scene of this ridiculous drama played out a month later. I was back in my sanctuary, my garage. It was quiet. The brown note was parked in its usual spot, covered with a tarp, enjoying a well-deserved retirement from public service. I was at my workbench, peacefully soldering a new capacitor, contemplating a new, much quieter hobby. Maybe bird watching. My phone buzzed. It was an email. The subject line read, "An inquiry from the Harmony Creek HOA." It was from the new HOA president, a young guy named Tom, who I'd seen at the emergency meeting. "Leo, hope you're well. First off, on behalf of the entire neighborhood, thank you again for what you did. Secondly, a quick question. The board has decided to bring back the annual 4th of July block party this year. We were wondering if you and your sound convoy might be available to provide the music. We've got a budget." I leaned back in my chair, the soldering iron smoking gently in its stand. I looked at the tarp-covered van. I thought about the fury, the chaos, the cops, the fines, and Brenda's crushed hydrangeas. A slow smile spread across my face. Some problems, it turns out, really can be solved with overwhelming, ridiculous, and glorious sonic firepower. You just have to be crazy enough to turn the damn thing on.